By 10:14 that morning, the house already smelled like sugar and hope. The kitchen counters were a parade of pink. Streamers, napkins, paper crowns Ellie had cut herself from construction paper and glitter glue. The vanilla frosting cooled in a mixing bowl, its surface glossy as wet paint. I'd promised myself this year would be different. 11 was supposed to feel big, halfway between dolls and phones, between childhood and that mysterious place where daughters start keeping secrets. So I'd gone all in, a cake layered tall as my hand, balloons from the dollar store bobbing out front, and a slow cooker humming with barbecue for the family that had sworn they wouldn't miss it this time. The clock on the wall clicked loud enough to sound judgmental. I dabbed a streak of frosting across the middle tier and caught the smear on my wrist, licking it off without thinking. Sweet, airy, a little grainy, like every homemade cake I'd ever made for a party that always seemed to start late. Ellie twirled into the room wearing one of her crowns. "Look, Mom!" "They sparkle in the sun." "They do, sweetheart. You made those perfect." I balanced the piping bag, careful to spell her name straight this time. Lel, i.e. Last year I'd written it sideways in my rush. And Mom had laughed. "You always were the messy one." I'd laughed too, but it had stuck like a splinter. The phone buzzed beside the mixing bowl. My pulse lifted, silly as that sounds. I wiped my fingers on a dish towel and checked the screen. Nothing new. Just the same blue-check text from last night. "Laura, family chat. Party today at 1. Hope to see you, 2 read receipts." No replies. I told myself they'd seen it late, that maybe Mom was bringing her famous potato salad, that Brianna was doing her makeup, that everyone would roll in right after lunch like always. I told myself a lot of things while I cleaned frosting off the counter. Outside, the balloons tugged against their strings, bright against the sky. Our mailbox looked dressed for celebration, pink ribbons fluttering in the warm May breeze. I adjusted one that had twisted the wrong way. Small details mattered. They were proof I'd tried. Ellie's laughter filled the living room as she arranged folding chairs. "Should we put Grandma next to Aunt Cheryl again or far apart?" "Far apart's probably safer," I said, forcing a light tone. "Remember the deviled egg debate?" She giggled, remembering how Grandma had scolded Cheryl for using store-bought paprika. For a moment, the sound made everything feel normal. I carried the cake to the table, the frosting shimmering where the sunlight hit it. 11 pink candles waited in a neat line beside it. I'd bought 2 boxes just in case. Somehow it felt unlucky to run short. By 11, I'd refreshed my messages 4 times. Still nothing. I even double-checked the group chat name, Family Pierce, as though I might have texted strangers by mistake. No. It was them. Mom, Cheryl, Brianna, Uncle Tom. The same names I'd scrolled past my whole life when someone needed just a little help until payday. I set my phone face down on the counter and exhaled through my teeth. "They'll come," I said aloud, mostly to the air. "They said they would." Ellie appeared with a roll of tape and the determination of an event planner. "Can I hang the happy birthday banner myself?" "Of course. Just don't stand on the chair. Use the stool." She nodded solemnly, like a soldier accepting orders. Watching her, I felt that ache of pride and worry tangled together. She still believed in the magic of birthdays, in promises kept, in family who showed up because they loved you. I wanted to believe it with her. The frosting had started to crust around the edges, so I ran the spatula once more to smooth it. The radio murmured an old country song, one Mom used to hum while cleaning. It felt almost like an omen, though I couldn't tell good or bad. I checked the clock again. 10:35. The kitchen smelled warm and ready. The world outside my window looked like it was waiting for a parade. I took one more photo of the cake, just in case it turned out as pretty as I hoped, and sent it quietly to the family chat. No response. Only those 2 pale blue checks, floating there like tiny eyes pretending not to see me. Still, I smiled for Ellie. "Everything's perfect," I said. And maybe for that moment it was. The house, the cake, the hope. I wiped the frosting from my wrist and looked out at the driveway, clean and empty beneath the sun. I told myself they'd show this time. By 1 o'clock, the house smelled too sweet. The frosting that had seemed festive in the morning now clung to the air, heavy as perfume. Ellie hovered by the front window, nose pressed to the glass, her paper crown slightly askew. From the kitchen, I could see her reflection superimposed on the empty street, balloons bobbing outside, driveway bare. I set the last plate on the table. "They'll be here soon, sweetheart," I said, arranging the pink napkins again, just for something to do. "You know Grandma likes to make an entrance." Ellie giggled, the sound uncertain. "Maybe she's bringing the big present she talked about." "Maybe." My voice came out too bright. The clock above the stove ticked loud enough to fill the silence between us. Each minute dragged its heels. At 1:15, I checked my phone. Nothing. Just the same text thread with my cheerful reminder. 2 blue checks, no reply. I told myself they were driving, that maybe reception was bad on Highway 32. At 1:30, I lit the candles anyway. The flame flickered, reflected in the frosting's gloss. Ellie clapped softly, ready for the front door to open. I kept glancing toward it, expecting the sound of tires, a car door, laughter. None came. By 2, the cake's frosting had softened, sliding slightly at the edges. The balloons outside sagged in the sun, ribbons twisting against each other. Ellie started checking her tablet, refreshing messages from Grandma. Nothing new since Thursday. She turned toward me. Maybe Grandma forgot? I forced a smile that felt like it cracked at the edges. Maybe traffic's bad. Ellie nodded slowly, not convinced but too kind to challenge me. She picked at a paper crown's glittered edge, shoulders hunched. I busied myself with the slow rituals of pretending, pouring juice into cups no one would touch, straightening chairs that didn't need straightening. The sound of the fridge filled the kitchen, a low hum that grew louder with every minute of quiet. Silence has a sound, I thought. It's the hum of the fridge when you've run out of lies. At 2:30, I gave up and opened my phone again, fingers clumsy. I refreshed my messages, then out of habit, opened Instagram. And there she was, Brianna, my 16-year-old sister, bright and smug as a magazine ad. She'd posted 10 minutes earlier. A photo of perfectly manicured nails, glitter tips catching the light, her hand draped over a salon chair. The caption read, "Just us girls, Saturday vibes." 3 laughing emojis. 2 of Mom's friends had already commented, "Gorgeous! And you deserve a day off." My stomach went hollow. I looked over at Ellie, still waiting by the window, and for a moment I considered lying again. Maybe they'd stop by later. Maybe this was just a mix-up. But the truth was right there, bright as her caption. They'd chosen a manicure over my daughter's birthday. My thumb hovered over the photo. I wanted to type something. Anything. Instead, I locked the screen and set the phone face down. The world outside looked so ordinary. Blue sky, trimmed lawns, the neighbor's dog asleep on the porch. No one would have guessed there was a party here with a cake no one came to eat. At 3, Ellie tried to start the music. "Should we play the playlist anyway?" she asked softly. "Sure," I said, though my voice caught halfway through. She tapped her tablet and tinny pop music filled the air. The cheerful beat only made the room feel emptier. She danced for a moment, half-hearted, then stopped. "Maybe we can save the cake for tomorrow?" "Sure, honey." We sat together at the table, watching candles that had long since burned out. The frosting had gone shiny and slick. I checked my phone one last time. No missed calls, no texts, no apologies. I scrolled back through old messages. "Mom, you're such a good daughter." "Mom, can you spot me $150 till Friday?" "Mom, don't forget Brianna's birthday." That last one had been sent last year. I'd sent money, of course. Ellie rested her chin in her hand. "Do you think Grandma's mad at us?" I hesitated. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just forget what matters." She nodded like she understood, though her eyes stayed fixed on the window. The sky started to dim toward late afternoon. The light coming through the curtains was softer now, the kind that makes everything look suspended. At 3:45, I stood, went to the kitchen and pulled the knife from the drawer. "Let's cut the cake," I said. Ellie blinked. Shouldn't we wait? I smiled, though it hurt. We've waited long enough. We sang the song together, quiet, just the two of us. Her small voice trembled halfway through. When we finished, I sliced the first piece, careful not to ruin her name across the top. The cake was light, perfectly baked, but the sweetness stuck in my throat. A candle, softened by the afternoon heat, leaned over and toppled into the frosting with a soft hiss. Wax trailed down like a tear. Ellie giggled a little. Guess it's tired too. Yeah, I said, lifting the piece of cake onto her plate. Guess so. Outside, the balloons tugged weakly in the wind, strings rubbing against the mailbox until one came loose and floated away. I watched it rise, pink against the grayish clouds, until it disappeared completely. Inside, the music stopped. The hum of the fridge filled the silence again. I sat down beside my daughter and took a bite of the cake that no one else would ever taste. The sugar was too sweet, the air too still. And all I could think, as the candle collapsed into a pool of frosting, was how familiar the disappointment felt, how heavy and predictable. I'd told myself they'd show this time. By evening, the house felt smaller. The balloons that had been bright and buoyant in the morning now drooped toward the floor, their ribbons tangled like wilted flowers. The kitchen table was sticky with frosting smears and confetti crumbs, a battlefield of good intentions. Ellie had gone to bed early, exhausted from pretending it hadn't hurt. I'd tucked her in with an extra blanket, kissed her forehead, and told her tomorrow would be better. She'd nodded, half asleep, and whispered, "It was still fun. Mommy." Now it was just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the faint vanilla scent clinging to the air. I scraped plates into the trash, wrapped slices of untouched cake in foil. The knife left pink streaks on the counter, thin as paper cuts. Every motion felt deliberate, like packing away pieces of hope I hadn't realized I still had. The silence pressed in, heavy but familiar. It was the same quiet that came after every holiday phone call that never happened, every unanswered text. I sat down at the table and unlocked my phone. The brightness stung my eyes. Family chat still showed my message from the morning. Party today at 1. Hope to see you. Still those 2 blue checks. Proof they'd seen it. I scrolled up, back through the months, then years. The pattern unfolded like a receipt that wouldn't stop printing. Deck 24, 2019. Mom, need $150 for medicine. Short till Friday. Me, of course, Mom, sending now. $150 Venmo transfer confirmed. Later that same day, a photo popped up on Mom's timeline, her at a restaurant, drink in hand, captioned, "Lunch date with my girls. Our Christmas Eve, not me though, May 2020, Mom. Can you help with Brianna's car insurance? 300 short, 300 sent. No thank you, no update." A week later, a story. Brianna posing with her friends by the lake, captioned, "Road trip season. July 2021. Mom, gas money's tight this week. I'll pay you back." She never did. I didn't ask. February 2022. Brianna, can you Zelle me 75? Emergency. I'd sent it before even asking what for. The phone lit my face as I scrolled through the digital trail of every small surrender. Venmo totals, timestamps, the polite emojis I'd added to soften the asks, smiley faces, hearts, love in transaction form. At the time, it had always seemed easier to send the money than to argue, to buy peace instead of earning it, to tell myself they'll remember next time. But tonight, sitting at a sticky table under sagging streamers, it finally started to click. They didn't forget me. They never planned to come. This wasn't neglect. It was comfort. They knew I'd still show up for them. Always. The realization wasn't a sharp stab. It was a slow, spreading ache. The kind that doesn't make you cry right away. Just empties you out, little by little. I leaned back, eyes tracing the ceiling, following the shadows cast by the fading light. The pink balloons bobbed gently with the air conditioning, their strings whispering against the chairs. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed, A neighbor coming home from dinner, maybe. Laughter floated through the walls, muffled but real. I thought of Mom's voice, the way she always called me our responsible one, the one who had it together. And I realized she'd been saying it like a fact, not a compliment. Like a reminder that I'd pick up the pieces so she didn't have to. I opened the fridge and slid in the leftover cake. It barely fit between half-empty condiment bottles. On the top shelf sat a half-used tub of frosting, still open. I shut the door and stared at my reflection in the metal handle. I looked tired, older than my 35 years. Maybe because disappointment ages you faster than time. My phone buzzed. A new text from a number I didn't recognize at first glance. Unknown. Hey, Laura. Mom said you might cover Brianna's nail appointment? No greeting. No apology. Just another request floating in like clockwork. I didn't answer. I turned the phone face down and let the vibration fade into the quiet. The frosting smell lingered, thick and cloying. Somewhere, one of the balloons finally gave up its fight and sagged to the floor with a faint squeak. I stared at it, feeling a strange mix of grief and calm, because maybe that was the truth of it. I'd been lighting candles for years, waiting for someone to see the flame, but maybe it never mattered who was watching. Maybe the act itself, keeping the light alive, was enough proof of love. I wiped the last smear of frosting from the table and whispered to the empty room. The candles always burned, even if no one watched. Money has a memory. It keeps its own kind of diary, one that never forgets. Sometimes I wonder when the ledger really started. Maybe it was the day the divorce papers were finalized, when my ex-husband's name vanished from the mortgage, and my mother's sympathy came with a $sign attached. The day after the courthouse, Mom called. "Sweetheart," she said, voice soft with that syrupy concern that always meant trouble. "I just hate that you're going through this. You know I'm on a fixed income, but I can help a little. Maybe 200? I told her not to worry, that I was fine. She paused. "Well, since you're working full-time again, could you help me instead?" Brianna's braces payment came up early. It took me a moment to process the shift. "Oh," I said. "Sure, how much?" "180. You're an angel." That was the first transfer. Venmo confirmed it. April 22nd, 2015, $180. For Bree's braces. That smiley face at the end felt like a receipt for my compliance. That year, I saved to buy Ellie a pink bike with streamers. It was the first Christmas in the new townhouse, just the two of us. On December 18th, Mom texted, "Hate to ask, but can you float me $200? Rent's tight. You know how Social Security is." I hesitated. I really did. But guilt is faster than logic. $200 sent. On Christmas Day, Mom posted a photo. Her living room filled with new gifts, a glittery purse, a perfume set, Brianna holding up a new phone. Caption, "Blessed beyond words. Family is everything." Ellie unwrapped her bike that morning and said, "Do you think Grandma will come ride with us?" I lied and said maybe next week. It came at midnight. "Laura, it's Mom. I'm in the ER. It's my chest again." I sat up, heart pounding. "Oh my God, are you okay?" "Don't panic, baby. They're saying it might just be stress. But I can't pay for all these tests. You know I'm on a fixed income." I didn't even think twice. $500 wired. The next day she texted, "All clear." False alarm, thank goodness. A week later, I saw Brianna's Snapchat story, both of them at a local casino. The caption, "Girls' night." Mom's lucky streak. I told myself it was old footage. I wanted to believe that. By now, it had become a rhythm. The calls always came with the same preface. You know I wouldn't ask if I didn't need to. May 2020's text still lived in my phone. "Mom, can you help with Brianna's car insurance?" $300 short. $300 sent, but the first time that pattern started was 2 years earlier. Mom. She needs her independence. You know how expensive being a single mom is. I'd almost laughed, the irony too bitter to swallow. Venmo, $250. Car insurance for Bree. A week later, Brianna posted a photo in front of her car. Manicured hand on the hood. Freedom at last. That December, I'd planned to surprise them. I bought gifts, baked pies, and drove 3 hours to their house. When I arrived, the driveway was empty. The lights were off. I called. No answer. Later that night, I checked Facebook. Mom had tagged herself at a holiday bash downtown. Her caption, "Tradition with my girls." Not one of those girls was me. When I confronted her later, she sighed. "Oh, honey, we didn't think you'd want to drive all that way." "You're always so busy." I asked why she hadn't told me she needed space instead of lying. She answered softly, "You know I'm on a fixed income, Laura. I can't afford to make everyone happy." That didn't even make sense. But she said it with such wounded conviction that I dropped it. While everyone else was baking sourdough and buying sanitizer, I was wiring money March, $300 for groceries. April, $400 for utilities. June, $150 for a new laptop for Brianna's online classes. I had my own bills, reduced hours at work. Ellie's school going remote, but every time my phone buzzed with "Can you help?" I answered yes. Mom's texts always ended the same way. "You're such a blessing, sweetheart. I raised you right." At first it sounded like love. Then it started to sound like training. That spring, Ellie needed braces. I remember sitting in the dentist's office, staring at the $3,200 estimate. When my phone buzzed again, "Mom, can you spot me $250? Power bill's late." "You know how it is," I typed a reply. "I can't right now, Mom. Things are tight." Within minutes, she called. Her voice trembled. "I didn't realize helping your mother was such a burden. You know I'm on a fixed income." The old guilt flared instantly. By the end of the call, I'd sent it anyway. But something in me cracked that day. I didn't tell her about Ellie's braces. Didn't ask her for help. I just learned to go quieter. When Ellie's 7th birthday rolled around, they skipped it, said they were sick. Later, I saw photos of them at the lake again. Brianna holding a sparkler. Mom texted that night. "Sorry we couldn't make it, sweetheart. You know I'm on a fixed income." That line again. The same one she'd used to explain away every absence, every lie, every ask. It had become a mantra, her moral permission slip. I was reconciling my taxes, scrolling through Venmo history to verify totals. When I saw the full picture, $180, $200, $500, $250, $300, $150, $400, $75, $250 line. After line, 10 years of digital, breadcrumbs. The totals blurred together, but the pattern was undeniable. Every time they needed something, they called me. Every time I needed something, even just company, they had plans. The affection was conditional, and I'd been paying the fee. I closed my laptop, numb. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they dressed their taking as love, their absence as accident. How every favor I granted turned into proof that I was strong, and therefore didn't need anything in return. Maybe that's what hurt most. Not the debt, not even the lies, but the realization that my family's love had a price, and I'd been footing the bill for a decade. I looked around the quiet kitchen, the same one where pink frosting still stained the counter, where Ellie's birthday banner hung limp across the wall. All those years, I'd believed I was helping them survive. But really, I'd just been keeping them comfortable and keeping myself small. The truth settled like dust in my chest. I hadn't been their daughter for a long time. I'd become their bank, their reliable, silent lender with a mother's heart and a ledger full of good intentions. And as that realization clicked fully into place, I whispered it out loud just to hear it said, I'd become their bank, not their daughter. 3 days after the party, the pink balloons were ghosts. The ones still half inflated sagged in the corner, making soft, rubbery sighs every time I brushed past. The banner that said, Happy Birthday, Ellie, hung crookedly, one end drooping as if too tired to keep pretending. It was 6:42 p.m. The house was quiet except for the soft clink of plates as I boxed up the last of the leftover decorations. Ellie was in her room humming to herself, building something out of Legos, her way of rebuilding worlds that made sense. The air smelled faintly of sugar and tape. I folded the paper tablecloth, streaked with pink frosting smudges. When my phone buzzed on the counter, Mom. For a moment, my breath caught. A flicker of that old reflex, the small hope that maybe, finally, there was an apology. A sorry we missed it, a we should have been there. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and unlocked the screen. Mom. Need $2,000 for Brianna's Sweet 17. She deserves something special. Just like that. No greeting, no hesitation, no mention of Ellie's party. I stared at the message, blinking slowly, like maybe my eyes had misread it. But there it was, crisp, casual, and perfectly on brand, $2,000. The same woman who couldn't make it to her granddaughter's birthday, who hadn't even texted that day, was now asking for the price of a small used car so my sister could have something special. Something special. A short, dry laugh escaped before I could stop it. The kind of laugh that comes from disbelief, not humor. It echoed in the empty kitchen, sharp and hollow. For 10 years, I'd sent the money. Every request, every emergency, every fixed-income guilt trip. I'd justified it as love, as duty, as family. But standing there, with the faint smell of frosting and disappointment still clinging to the air, I realized how ridiculous it had all become. I opened Venmo. My thumb hovered over the pay button, muscle memory kicking in. Then slowly, I typed $1 in the memo line. I added, "Congrats." My reflection in the phone's black glass was calm. No tremor. No second guessing. When I hit send, the confirmation ping sounded almost musical. A soft chime that felt like punctuation at the end of a very long, very expensive sentence. For a few seconds, I just stood there, breathing, listening to the hum of the fridge and the faint clatter of Ellie's Legos down the hall. Then I opened my messages and scrolled up through the years of transactions, all the proof of my misplaced loyalty. It wasn't anger I felt now. Not really. It was something quieter, steadier, relief. I locked my phone and set it face down on the counter. The frosting stain from the party was still there, a faint pink streak near the edge. I grabbed a sponge and started scrubbing. Slow circular motions. The color lifted little by little until the counter gleamed again, pale and clean. I'd thought money bought love. But maybe what it really bought was silence. Theirs and mine. When I finally rinsed the sponge and squeezed out the last of the soapy water, the kitchen felt new, not empty, just cleared. That's when I picked up the phone again, but not to text. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to Locksmith, East Ridge Hardware. A man answered on the second ring. "East Ridge, this is Dan." "Hi," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "I need to have my locks changed. Tonight, if possible," he hesitated. "Tonight? Sure, ma'am. We can have someone there in about an hour." "That's fine." When I hung up, I exhaled for what felt like the first time all week. I looked around at the quiet house, at the pink ribbons curled in the trash, the clean counters, the small lamp in the corner casting warm light over the dining table. It wasn't the house that had changed. It was me. All those years, I'd thought peace meant keeping the peace, smoothing things over, sending the money, avoiding confrontation. But maybe peace wasn't about comfort. Maybe it was about cost. And for the first time I realized, peace might cost more than money, but I could afford it now. I walked to the window and glanced outside. The evening light was fading, that dusky blue hour where everything feels like it's holding its breath. Ellie's laughter drifted faintly from her room, soft, content, untouched by any of it. I wanted to keep it that way. My phone buzzed again on the counter. "Mom, $1? Is this a joke? You think this is funny? After everything I've done for you." Then another. "Mom, you've changed, Laura. You're acting crazy." And finally, a third, seconds later. Mom, don't forget we're family. Family helps family, I didn't reply. I just turned the phone off completely and dropped it into the junk drawer, face down among old batteries and paper clips. Outside, headlights swept across the street as a car pulled up somewhere nearby. The sound was distant, ordinary. I gathered the last few balloons, popped them one by one, and tossed them in the trash bag. Each pop felt like punctuation, sharp, decisive, final. Then, just as I was tying off the bag, a sudden sound cut through the quiet. A heavy thud-thud-thud against the front door. I froze. Heart stuttering. Ellie's footsteps padded softly down the hall. Mom? Someone's here. Before I could answer, a red and blue glow began to pulse against the living room curtains, flickering, insistent, washing the walls in color. For a split second, my brain refused to make sense of it. Then came the unmistakable flash of light, police lights, slicing through the evening haze. The doorbell rang, sharp and echoing. I wiped my hands on my jeans, feeling my pulse in my throat. Behind the curtain, two silhouettes waited, one tall, one shorter, both framed in flashing blue. I glanced once more at the counter, where my phone still sat powered off, silent. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel panic, just a steady, resigned calm. I had paid my dues. Now, apparently, the collection had come to my door. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, as the red and blue light spilled through every window. By the time I reached the front door, my hands were damp with dish soap and nerves. Through the frosted glass, two shapes shifted under the strobe of red and blue. One was tall and broad-shouldered. The other moved with a quieter, slower patience. I opened the door halfway. Ma'am? The taller officer, a man in his 40s with a trimmed beard and a calm expression, lifted his hand in a small, non-threatening wave. Evening. I'm Officer Trent. This is Officer Lasky. We got a call about a possible property dispute at this address. I blinked. A what? Your mother, Janet Lewis, reported that some of her belongings are being held here without her consent. For a second, the words didn't make sense. Then they hit all at once, sharp as glass. I exhaled slowly. Her belongings? Yes, ma'am. The younger officer glanced down at his notepad. She said she used to stay here sometimes and that you changed the locks. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh again, but this time it came out quiet and bitter. That's technically true, I said. I did change the locks, but she hasn't lived here in over 6 months. Would you mind if we spoke inside for a minute? I hesitated, not because I had anything to hide, but because it still felt surreal. Ellie peeked from the hallway, eyes wide. It's okay, honey, I said softly. Go back to your room for now. She nodded, retreating down the hall with her stuffed cat clutched to her chest. I stepped aside. Come in! The officers entered carefully, scanning the room the way people do when they're not sure what they've walked into. The house smelled faintly of vanilla still, that ghost of birthday cake that refused to leave. Mind if I ask? Officer Trent said gently. Does your mother have anything stored here? Furniture, boxes, personal effects? No, nothing. You're sure? I pointed to the open living room, every surface tidy, not a trace of anyone else's life. You can look if you want. She hasn't been here since April. I crossed to the kitchen table where my laptop and a small stack of papers sat. Hang on. I pulled up my calendar, scrolling to April. Here. I turned the screen toward them. April the 2nd. The last day she came over. Dropped off a bag of clothes she said she was donating. That's the last time she set foot inside. The younger officer scribbled something in his notebook. And you said you changed the locks recently? Yesterday, after she texted me asking for $2,000. His pen stopped mid-motion. I'm sorry, 2,000? Yeah. I picked up my phone, now powered back on, and opened the message thread. The officers leaned closer as I scrolled. Mom, need $2,000 for Brianna's Sweet 17? She deserves something special. Me sent 1. Congrats. Mom, 1? Is this a joke? You think this is funny? After everything I've done for you? Mom, you've changed. You're acting crazy. Mom, don't forget we're family. Family helps family. I scrolled further back, showing the old messages, months of, "Can you help me with rent?" And "Just a small loan, and you know I'm on a fixed income." The officers exchanged a glance. "Okay," said Trent, voice even. "That's a lot of context. And she hasn't been physically living here or paying rent?" I shook my head. Not a dime. Outside, a car door slammed. We all looked toward the window. Through the curtains, the flicker of porch light revealed a familiar silhouette. Short, stocky, clutching a handbag tight to her chest. Janet. Even from here, I could recognize her stance, that stiff, defiant posture she used whenever she was cornered. I felt a dull ache start in my chest, half anger, half disbelief. The younger officer excused himself and stepped outside to speak with her. Through the glass, I could see her gesturing wildly, pointing at the house, shaking her head as if she were the victim of something unspeakable. Officer Trent stayed inside with me. "Ma'am, I can tell this is uncomfortable," he said. "But can I ask, have there been any prior disputes? Calls like this before?" I nodded once. "Not like this. But she has a pattern. Guilt? Manipulation? I used to think it was love." He didn't write that part down, but he didn't have to. The understanding in his eyes told me he'd seen this before. Through the window, I could see my mother's mouth moving fast. I couldn't hear her, but I knew the script by heart. She's shutting me out. I just want my things. I don't understand why she's being so cruel. A knock came at the back door. It startled me. A softer rap this time. When I opened it, there stood Mrs. Odell, my next-door neighbor, wrapped in her thin blue cardigan, hair still in curlers. "I saw the lights," she said quietly. "Everything okay, dear?" Before I could answer, she peered past me and spotted the officer. "Oh, I suppose you're here about her mother," Trent blinked. "You know the situation, ma'am?" Mrs. Odell snorted softly. "I know Janet. She hasn't been inside this house in months, always telling tales to get what she wants." She looked at me, eyes kind but sharp. "Don't you worry, honey. We all saw her leave for good last spring. I remember because she asked to borrow my moving boxes and never brought them back." The officer smiled faintly. "That helps, ma'am." "Thank you," Mrs. Odell patted my arm. "You don't let her pull you back in. Some folks mistake taking for loving." "Thank you," I said quietly. She gave a firm nod and shuffled back toward her porch, muttering something about drama on a Tuesday night. Inside, Officer Lasky returned from speaking with my mother. His expression told me everything before he even opened his mouth. She's saying she just wanted to retrieve her belongings," he said carefully. But when I asked what belongings, she couldn't specify. First she said furniture, then photo albums, then... Well, it got a little inconsistent. Trent sighed, tucking his notebook away. "All right. Here's what's going to happen." He turned to me, his tone shifting to firm reassurance. "You've got nothing to worry about, Ms. Lewis. This is a civil issue, not a criminal one. She has no property claim here, no tenancy. You've documented communication, and you've changed the locks legally." My throat tightened, not from fear, but from the sudden, overwhelming rush of relief. "So," I asked, voice quiet, "what happens now?" He offered a small, sympathetic smile. "We'll make a note of the call. If she contacts you again or shows up, you can file for a trespass notice. For tonight, you're fine, ma'am." He stepped toward the door, pausing as he reached for the knob. "I'm sorry she put you through this." I managed a weak smile. "It's okay. It's been a long time coming." Outside, the night air was still, the flashing lights beginning to fade as their cruiser idled. I watched as the officers spoke briefly to Janet again, gesturing toward her car. She shook her head, arms folded, then finally got in. Slamming the door, the engine coughed to life, and the red taillights disappeared down the street. The quiet that followed felt different. Not the heavy silence of neglect, but something cleaner. Mrs. Odell waved once from her porch before heading inside. Across the street, a sprinkler clicked on, spattering the lawn with rhythm. I stood in the doorway, the cool air brushing against my arms, my heartbeat slowly settling. Inside, Ellie peeked down the hall again. "Mom, is everything okay?" I turned to her and smiled, soft but certain. "Everything's fine, sweetheart." "Everything's finally fine." She came to my side and wrapped her arms around my waist. I held her there for a long moment, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, bubble gum, and innocence. Out on the street, the last flicker of light from the cruiser faded, leaving the night completely still. The officer's words echoed quietly in my mind. "You're fine." "Ma'am?" For the first time I believed them. I closed the door, turned the deadbolt, the new one, and stood in the warm hush of my own home. The flashlights were gone. The sirens were gone. And finally, so was she. The house was finally still. Ellie had fallen asleep hours ago, curled beneath her quilt, her hair fanned across the pillow like soft gold threads. I'd checked on her twice, listening to the tiny whistle of her breathing, proof that at least one thing in this world was safe. Downstairs, the kitchen clock ticked through the silence. The air smelled faintly of cold coffee and old frosting. A half-empty mug sat in front of me, ringed with the dark outline of patience wearing thin. The phone screen glowed pale blue against the dark. I hadn't wanted to look, but curiosity was a reflex. The old pull that came from years of waiting for their words to mean love again. There they were. "Mom, after all we've done for you? Brianna, you ruined everything. No hello. No, are you okay?" Just those two messages, stacked like little verdicts. I scrolled further, even though I shouldn't have. "Mom, you embarrassed us." "The neighbors are talking." "Mom, you didn't have to get the police involved." "Mom, you think you're better than us now?" The screen blurred for a second, not because I was crying, but because I was tired. Bone-deep tired, the word us used to sting. Tonight, it just sounded like a club I was finally not a member of. I set the phone face down. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, steady, faithful, mechanical. It was the same sound I'd described to myself days ago, the sound of silence when you've run out of lies. I leaned back, letting my fingers tap the ceramic mug. Once, twice, slow. The coffee was cold, but I sipped it anyway. Every family has a currency. Ours was guilt. They traded in it like gold, handing it out in sighs, in "you never call," in long voicemails that began with "I hate to ask," and ended with "you know I wouldn't if I didn't have to." And I'd paid every time. Paid with dollars. Yes, $150 here, $300 there. The quiet auto-pay of obligation. But I'd also paid in apologies, in boundaries I never set, in the hope that one more deposit might finally buy me love that stayed. Tonight, the ledger was closed. The police had left hours ago, their tire marks faintly visible in the damp driveway. My mother's car hadn't passed again. No one had knocked. No more accusations, no sirens, no chaos, just peace. Quiet, awkward peace. On the counter sat the leftover birthday crown Ellie had made, its edges slightly crumpled, the word princess drawn in glitter pen. I ran my thumb along it. She'd waited by the window that day, asking every 15 minutes when Grandma's car would pull up. I'd told her soon. That word still hurt to remember. I took the crown and set it on the refrigerator, pinning it with a small magnet shaped like a heart. It looked almost like a keepsake now. Proof that we had thrown a party even if no one came. My gaze drifted to the front door. The new deadbolt gleamed faintly in the hallway light. Beneath it hung a short brass chain I'd installed earlier that evening. A final touch, something about the solid click that made the air feel safer. I stood, crossing the room. My fingers found the latch and slid it into place. Click, that sound. Clean, final, small. Felt like punctuation. I leaned my forehead against the door for a moment, listening to the night outside. Crickets, a car in the distance. Wind brushing the mailbox balloons that still hung limp from last weekend's party. In the dim reflection of the glass, I saw my own face. Tired, yes, but calm. For once, I didn't look like a woman waiting for something. I turned off the light, the kitchen falling into darkness except for the faint glow of the refrigerator. The house breathed around me, soft, settled, alive. As I walked back toward the stairs, I whispered into the quiet, mostly to myself. Peace costs more than money. But I finally paid it. The door chain held fast behind me, silver against the wood. A simple symbol that, tonight, meant everything. The next morning arrived quietly. No phone calls, no pounding on the door. Just sunlight edging through the blinds, catching the dust in golden suspension. The house felt different, lighter. Ellie was still asleep, tangled in her blanket fortress upstairs. I made coffee, real coffee this time, hot and strong, and sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. The same spot where, 2 nights ago, I'd faced flashing police lights. Now, it was just me, the hum of the fridge, and the low click of the keys. I opened Venmo. The list of transactions stretched longer than I remembered. Tiny blue dots, emojis, and half-hearted descriptions. Gas money, medicine, emergency, vet bill, Brianna's car, insurance, groceries, I'll pay you, back. They went on and on. 4 years of tiny withdrawals. From my piece. I clicked download all. Transactions. A little spinning circle blinked. Then a file appeared. Venmo history 19/2023.csv. I opened it. Columns filled the screen like the clean bones of truth. Date, name, note, amount, the first entry, Jan 12, 2019, Mom, need to fix the furnace, $100. The last, May 10th, 2023, Mom, congrats, $1 between those dates, 117 transactions. I scrolled slowly, letting each line pass like an old bruise being pressed. The numbers added up fast. $50 here, $250 there, $600, just until payday. A few were labeled family emergency. I remembered each of them vividly. None had been emergencies. One was a pedicure appointment. Another, a quick trip to the coast. I opened Excel and began copying rows. The neat cells filled with pale color. I started coding. Green, asked nicely. Yellow, guilt-tripped. Red, threatened or manipulated. The pattern that emerged was ugly, almost artistic in its repetition. Green, green, yellow, red. Green, yellow, red, 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 red. By the time I finished, the total at the bottom read $4,780. Enough for a small used car. Enough for a semester of Ellie's community dance classes. Enough to fund every forgotten emergency twice over. My hands were steady as I stared at the total. Not shaking, not angry. Just done. I scrolled back up and read through the earliest entries again. That first year after my divorce, I'd been desperate for approval. I'd thought if I just kept helping, they'd finally see me as more than a failure. But the help had turned into habit. Their needs turned into expectation. My love turned into a line item. I minimized the spreadsheet and opened another tab, an old email thread titled Family Receipts. It was full of screenshots. A photo of my mother's Facebook post from the night she claimed she couldn't afford rent, standing beside a new dining set. A text from my sister, "Can you just send it? You make more than me anyway." A voicemail transcription, "You owe it to family to share." That's what good daughters do. I gathered them all, the receipts, the texts, the messages, and dropped them into a folder. I named it Family Records. Then, without quite knowing why, I clicked print. The printer hummed, line by line spitting out proof in black and white. The sound was oddly soothing, mechanical and final. Each sheet slid into the tray with the same whispering rhythm, the rhythm of things that can't be denied anymore. I stacked the pages neatly and took out a small manila folder from the drawer. On its front, I wrote in black pen, "For Ellie, when you're older. I slipped the papers inside, smoothing the edges flat. It wasn't anger that guided my hand, or even the need for revenge. It was clarity, a kind of quiet, administrative mercy. Someday, when Ellie asked why Grandma didn't come to birthdays anymore, I'd have something honest to show her. Not bitterness, just truth. On the corner of the kitchen table sat a tiny pink paper crown, the one Ellie had made during the party. The glitter had rubbed off in places, leaving faint silver dust on the wood. I placed the folder beneath it for a moment, the crown resting like a paperweight over the years of guilt and transaction. The contrast made me smile. Love above ledger. I opened my journal and started writing notes in the margin. April 2019, need $100. December 2020, car repair. March 2021, emergency fund. Every one of them followed by, paid, but not anymore. This was my new kind of record. Not for accountability, but for closure. Outside, the mail truck passed, the sound distant but familiar. For years, I'd flinched at deliveries, bills, collection notices, my mother's letters with that looping handwriting I could spot from a mile away. Now, I almost hoped there'd be one waiting. Just so I could decide not to open it, I closed the laptop. The screen went black, reflecting my own face back at me. In that reflection, I saw no guilt, no hesitation. Just someone finally finished with proving her worth through receipts. I took the folder, slid it into a small lockbox under the cabinet, and turned the key. The click echoed faintly, sharp and certain. As I sat back, the morning light spilled across the table, catching the pink glitter from the crown and scattering it like dusted sunlight. I picked up my mug and took one long sip of coffee. It was still warm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. The ledger was balanced, the numbers told the story, and the story, at last, was mine. By morning, the world felt rinsed clean. A soft drizzle had come through overnight, leaving the front steps slick and the air smelling faintly of wet earth and lilacs. I was still in my robe, stirring a second cup of coffee, when a gentle knock tapped at the door. 3 soft raps, polite, rhythmic Mrs. Odell. I peeked through the curtain, and sure enough, there she was on the porch, wrapped in her pale yellow raincoat, her gray curls tucked beneath a scarf. In her hands, a foil-covered brownie pan balanced on top of a small white envelope. I opened the door. "Morning, Mrs. Odell." "Morning, dear." Her voice was the same mix of cheer and gravity that always made me feel like I was 12 again, being gently corrected by a teacher. "Didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to check in and bring this." She held out the brownie pan, still warm through the foil. The smell of chocolate and walnuts drifted into the doorway, homey, steady, kind. "Brownies?" I asked, taking it carefully. She smiled. "My peace offering." "Well, more like your peace celebration," I laughed softly. "You didn't have to—" "I know," she interrupted, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "But I wanted to. That whole ruckus the other night. Lord, I haven't seen that many flashing lights on this street since the raccoon got into the transformer." I smiled. "I remember that. The whole neighborhood lost power." She gave me a look. "Seems you just lost patience." There was no judgment in her tone, just quiet understanding. She unwrapped her scarf, shaking off a few drops of rain. "You did the right thing, you know. People will talk. They always do. But you did the hard, right thing." Her words landed like warm hands on cold skin. I set the brownies on the counter and poured her a cup of coffee before realizing she'd brought more. The envelope, now resting beside the pan, bore my name in her small, looping handwriting. "What's this?" I asked. She nudged it toward me. "Open it." Inside was a grocery gift card, $200, neatly tucked with a note written on a small square of stationery. "For you and Ellie. Groceries or a small treat." From one woman who's had to start over to another, my throat tightened. "Mrs. Odell, I can't—" "Oh, hush." She waved me off. "It's not charity. It's solidarity. There's a difference." Besides, I've got no one to spend it on, and I like knowing I'm feeding someone who deserves it. I looked down at the card, tracing the embossed numbers with my thumb. You really didn't have to do this. Peace, she said simply, is expensive. Pay it gladly, I smiled. I think I already made the down payment, she chuckled. That raspy smoker's laugh that always made me grin. Then this is just interest. We sat together for a while, sipping coffee and sharing quiet conversation about the weather, Ellie's school, and her cat Baxter, who had recently taken to sleeping like a man on vacation. The calm between us felt like something old and familiar. Neighborly, yes, but also deeper. A kind of woman-to-woman knowing that words can't quite name. When she stood to leave, she glanced at the front door, at the new deadbolt gleaming faintly in the light. That new lock looks good, she said approvingly. You installed that yourself? Not yet, I admitted. The locksmith put in one, but I bought another, sturdier. Haven't gotten around to putting it in, she tilted her head. You should. Nothing says closure like your own screwdriver, I laughed. You're right. After she left, with one brownie wrapped in foil for quality control, I carried the little box of tools from under the sink to the entryway. The new deadbolt was brushed nickel, solid and heavy. I laid out the screws, the screwdriver, the metal plate, each part lined up on the mat like a ritual. Ellie patted in halfway through, rubbing her eyes. Mommy, what are you doing? Putting in our new lock, I said, smiling. This one's ours. Just ours. She watched as I fitted the bolt, turning the screws until the metal sat flush against the wood. The satisfying click of the screwdriver was almost musical. When it was done, I tested it twice. Smooth, steady, final. Ellie clapped once, sleepily. Can I lock it? Go ahead. She turned the knob until it clicked. Her grin was small but proud. It sounds strong. It is. She leaned against me, resting her head on my arm. Are we safe now? I kissed the top of her head. Yes, baby. We're safe. She nodded, satisfied, then shuffled back toward her room. I stayed by the door for a moment longer, hand still on the lock. Outside, Mrs. Odell's porch light flickered on through the mist. A soft yellow glow against the gray morning. The house smelled of brownies and rain. I took one last sip of cooling coffee and whispered, Peace is expensive. The bolt slid home with a clean metallic sound, and in that small, simple moment, screwdriver in hand, new lock gleaming, rain whispering against the glass, I realized I'd finally paid in full. Saturday came with soft sunshine and the sound of the local radio humming through the kitchen, the kind of gentle static and easy voices that filled the quiet rather than breaking it. It had been 1 week since the police lights, the confrontation, the texts. 1 week since I'd changed the locks, printed the records, and stopped waiting for an apology that was never coming. The house smelled of sugar and vanilla again. Ellie stood on her little wooden stool by the counter, holding a whisk almost as tall as her forearm. The mixing bowl wobbled under her small hands as she stirred the batter with a seriousness only 6-year-olds could muster. Don't forget to scrape the sides, I said. Grinning, she did, with exaggerated care, and then licked the spatula, smearing frosting on her nose. We both laughed. The kitchen window was cracked open, letting in a breeze that fluttered the lace curtains. Outside, the neighbor's wind chime tinkled, soft and random, like punctuation in the quiet. There were no balloons this time. No streamers. No guest list taped to the fridge. Just us. 2 plates, 2 forks, 6 cupcakes cooling on the counter. Ellie's doll, dressed in its best plastic tiara, sat on the table beside the candles. Can we make pink frosting again? She asked, hopping down from the stool. Of course, I said. Pink's your signature color. She wrinkled her nose thoughtfully. Maybe purple next year. Purple, I agreed. Very regal. We mixed food coloring into a bowl of white frosting until it swirled into a perfect soft pink, the same shade as the balloons that had wilted in the yard just a week ago. Only this time the color didn't sting. It felt like a fresh start. I handed her the frosting knife. Your turn, chef, She spread the icing clumsily, each swirl uneven but heartfelt. By the time she finished, half the cupcakes looked like melting clouds. But they were beautiful in the way that truth is beautiful. Imperfect and entirely ours. When we were done, she climbed onto one of the kitchen chairs, peering proudly at the small row of cupcakes. "So," I said, "ready for our party?" She giggled. "It's just us." "Exactly," I said. "That's what makes it perfect." I struck a match, lighting a single candle in the center cupcake. The tiny flame trembled for a moment before standing tall. The radio played an old tune, something from the 70s, all soft guitar and easy rhythm. My mother would have called it background music. To me, it felt like peace. Ellie took a deep breath and blew out the candle. The smoke curled into a thin gray ribbon, twisting toward the ceiling before disappearing. I clapped once. "Good wish?" She nodded. "The best. What did you wish for?" I teased. She grinned. "If I tell, it won't come true." Smart girl. We cut the first cupcake in half and shared it, the frosting sweet and light. I'd used the same recipe as before, but it tasted different now. Or maybe I did. After a few quiet minutes, Ellie glanced toward the window, her voice small. "Mommy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Do we have to invite Grandma next year?" The question hit softly. No pain, just truth. I set down my fork and smiled. "No, honey. We invite people who show up." She seemed to think about that for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." And just like that, the subject was settled. The way children can close a wound that adults keep reopening. Outside, the sky brightened, sunlight spilling through the lace and scattering across the kitchen table in dappled patterns. The air smelled faintly of cake, sugar, and something new. Possibility, maybe. Ellie hummed along with the radio as she decorated the remaining cupcakes, sprinkling colored sugar like fairy dust. Her small fingers worked carefully, and her tongue poked out in concentration. I leaned against the counter, watching her. The afternoon light glowed around her hair, making it look almost haloed. And in that moment, the ache of the past week, the silence, the humiliation, the confrontation, all of it softened. What replaced it wasn't triumph or bitterness. It was stillness, the kind that fills a space that used to echo. I thought of the spreadsheet, the printed records, the folder tucked away in the cabinet labeled "For Ellie, when you're older." I didn't know when she'd read it. Maybe she never would. Maybe she wouldn't need to, because she'd already learned the most important part. That love isn't something you buy, or beg for, or prove through debt. It's something you build. And sometimes, it starts in a quiet kitchen with too much frosting and only 2 chairs at the table. When the cupcakes were finished, Ellie held one up to me. "You get the one with extra sprinkles," she said. "Why's that?" "Because you did all the hard work," she said seriously. "You bought the stuff and mixed it and cleaned up and didn't even get mad when I dropped an egg." I laughed. "That's true. You make a strong case." She handed it over with both hands, and I took a bite. It was messy and perfect. For a while, we just sat. 2 people, 1 small victory, no noise. The kind of silence that's alive, not empty. The lace curtains swayed lightly. The candle smoke had long faded. I closed my eyes for a second. Listening. The refrigerator hummed, the radio murmured. Ellie giggled softly as she licked frosting from her fingers. The house finally sounded like home. And as I opened my eyes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. Tired. Yes, but whole. Blood doesn't make a family. Choice does. And peace, I've learned, is worth exactly $1.